Hey guys, it's your boy Progress, and welcome to a brand new video. Obviously, if you've seen the title, you would know that I'm gonna be talking about something that I definitely can't say is that unpopular of an opinion, but I thought that I would take a more analytical and research-based approach and explain to you guys, at least from my perspective and probably quite a few others, how and why the Grammys may have gotten so bad, especially in recent times. So we're gonna be going over a few things like alleged favoritism, fraud, and a bunch of other things that are just not a great thing to be going on at such a prestigious award show. So let's get into it. Obviously, over time, award shows that have a big focus on arts, such as, film or music, have had the validity of even their necessity to exist called into question. And I really do think that the general public's view of these award shows has turned quite sour in more recent times, and probably not even just in this last decade, but definitely it has been emphasized in this last decade, where a lot of the elitism that goes on at these shows has been, more focused on and understood that it's not really a matter of them actually being able to make a judgment on who made the best thing or who is the best at making these things, because in all honesty, they can't do that. But a good way to represent that the general public's viewpoint of these award shows has gone down in more recent times is to just look at the statistics. At the 57th annual Grammys back in 2015, the viewership actually reached all the way to 25.3 million viewers, but just 5 years later, at the end of the 62nd annual Grammy Awards in 2020, the viewership fell all the way down to 18.7 million viewers. Which obviously, I'm in no way trying to say that almost 19 million viewers is something to scoff at, or that that's not a large viewership, but you have to take into consideration, when you do the math on that, that is an over 26% drop in viewership of the Grammys in just 5 years. That's a big deal. When more than a quarter of the viewer base of something just stops watching it, you have to really start thinking, why? Now, of course, I do eventually want to get to talking about The Weeknd, the artist who just didn't get a nomination, which was absolutely ridiculous, of course. But before I get into that, I think it's important for you guys to see what happened just before last year's Grammys, as I think it's a pretty eye-opening thing when it comes to detailing the possible corruption that actually is going on at the Grammys. What I'm talking about is that last year, the then Grammy CEO, Deborah Dugan, made a formal complaint to the Academy and the Grammys board about many things that she saw as wrong that were going on there. One of which was that she alleged that there was a lot of corruption that caused voting irregularities involving who was chosen to be a Grammy nominee, including one case where Rolling Stones lists that she, quote, outlined an incident where an artist and their representative sat on the nominating committee for Song of the Year last year, leading to that artist appearing in the category ahead of acts like Ed Sheeran and Ariana Grande, end quote. And further down the line, Deborah also detailed an incident where the producer of the Grammys of that year, named Ken Elrich, supposedly sent out an email to herself and Harvey Mason Jr., who was the Recording Academy chairman but now has replaced Deborah, where Elrich, quote, attempted to press the Academy into nominating a song by a particular superstar in order to increase his ability to convince the superstar to perform at the Grammys, end quote. Now, the biggest part of this story that I'm sure most of you will find quite concerning is actually that just a week after Deborah sent out this formal complaint, the Academy placed her on administrative leave. And the Academy's listed reason for why they chose to do this was because there was apparently a formal allegation of misconduct against her that then got placed. And honestly, that's a little bit too suspicious to just be like, oh yeah, it was just coincidence that that happened. Because you have to keep in mind that Deborah did not go out of her way to make any of this public until after they chose to put her on leave, which essentially means that if she never went public about this, it would have been the perfect silencing tactic for them to use against her. And it really sucks, because in the end, they ultimately decided to fire Deborah just 10 10 days before the Grammys aired. And guess what one of the reasons was for why they chose to do such a, well, horrible thing, but jokingly, oh, great thing. It was because she decided to speak out publicly against it, and they essentially used it as a,
see, that'll teach anybody in this business to try and speak out against us when they see us doing things they don't like
a really huge thing to just keep in mind after, like, knowing all of this stuff, to understand that this isn't just like her wanting to, oh, just be the big boss and make the big decisions and doesn't like what's happening here. You really have to understand that even her lawyer has it listed in an interview that they did together.
Deborah, right here, she worked for 8 years as an executive at EMI. She worked for 8 years as a president at Disney. She worked for 8 years for Bono at Red, raising hundreds of millions of dollars to eradicate AIDS. She never once filed an HR complaint, and there was never once an HR complaint filed against her.
And yet, you're gonna try and tell me that just 6 months into her job as the new, like, chief executive at the Grammys, all of a sudden, the second she tries to speak out against a company because of the things that she feels are wrong, immediately there's just complaints lined up and they kick her out. Seems a little bit strange, doesn't it? Just something for you guys to think about, well, listening to the rest of this. Which, now that you have that as a basis for understanding some of the possible, like, really intense corruption going on, you know, like, at the Grammys, it's pretty important for us to get into the most recent example of people starting to realize something's going on here. And of course, what I'm talking about here is the Canadian artist known as The Weeknd somehow getting snubbed from the Grammys, not even getting a single nomination, which of course this caused a massive upset. And if you don't know who this guy is, I'm gonna just read you some stats that explain to you why people were mad that he didn't even get, like, nominated for anything. Keep in mind that his song Blinding Lights got over 4.5 billion streams in this last year, leading him to get the most streamed song on Spotify of 2020. He peaked at #1 on the charts in 34 countries, and that's not even considering that the album that Blinding Lights was on ended up being one of the largest debut albums of 2020, with 221 million streams and 275,000 sold copies of the album in just its opening release week. Overall, these projects were fantastic, and that is why it got such good reception to the point where it was able to break all these records and get so many streams and buys. And somehow, with all of that, he was not ever nominated for a Grammy. So because of this, The Weeknd himself actually ended up publicly posting on social media, quote, "The Grammys remain corrupt. You owe me, my fans, and the industry transparency," end quote. Which then led to a lot of public outcry, even from other musicians such as Drake, Elton John, Kid Cudi, Akon, Sam Smith, and many more, backing up and supporting The Weeknd's sentiment that goes against the Grammys. Why is this all so important, though, to show that people are getting fed up with the Grammys? Well, it's because for one of the first times ever, it got so bad with the backlash that the Grammys actually ended up having the current sit-in as the chief executive of the Grammys do a press run that was obviously an attempt to try and save the image of the Grammys after so many people have been upset about what happened, but unfortunately for them, it turned into people questioning even more what was going on, because the way that this guy answered questions just left me so confused, and we're gonna get into what he talked about. So here we've got actually one of the first articles that came out with a Q&A from the Grammy chief, Harvey Mason Jr., where, you know, they've got in bold is the questions he was asked, and then in not bolded is his answers. But one of the first questions that they asked him that genuinely made me concerned with his answer was when they asked, is it the same voting committee for all of the top 4 categories? And he responded saying, yes, it is. This is a little concerning because that's a lot of stuff for a single committee to be voting on, like for the top 4, because the big 4 categories categories are for Best Album of the Year, Song of the Year, Record of the Year, and Best New Artist. So that's quite a bit of stuff to try and have one committee listening to. So it was a little concerning seeing that he answered, yes, it's just one committee voting on everything like that. And then they kind of ask him a more specific question about how maybe what has gone on with the Weeknd, you know, does it put the nomination process into question, and are there plans to revise it, sorry. But the response is, once again, it gets a little more concerning, because he says that he does not think that any of this calls anything into question. And he says, oh yeah, like he was in the core room that is like, you know, deciding on the big four. And he's just like backing these people up hardcore, just being like, oh, they are music professionals. They are excellent at the top of their craft in songwriting and producing. And so he's trying to like really be like, oh, there's no way that there could be any dents in this process because, well, these people are amazing at their jobs. And then he goes on to say they were critically listening to every song that came across their desks. Which, that is super important for later, because one of the answers that he gives a little bit further down shows that maybe that's not the truth. And then a big question, the bombshell comes in. Okay, how big is that committee? And he says that it was 20 or so people. There are more people like voting on what is the best pie in a pie baking contest than there are people voting for what should be nominated for the top 4 general categories for the Grammys. Like, that's mind-blowing to me. They should have split it up into individual committees for the general 4 categories. But then, of course, the next best question to ask is, you know, since he was there in the room like he claims, does he think that all the releases got a fair shake? Great question. And he responds saying, oh, absolutely. All the records get the fairest of shakes. We listen to all the music, even an album. You're listening to almost the whole album. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Can you... What was that? Almost the whole album. How? How are you voting for a thing that you maybe listened to almost the whole thing of? That doesn't make sense. That'd be like going to the movies, watching 1 hour of a 2-hour-long movie, and then leaving a review saying, oh, I'm absolutely sure the ending must have been amazing. Well, the first half, it was fantastic, so the ending must have been amazing. Like, it doesn't make any sense. That's not how the process should work. How is that a fair shake? You can't be like, ah, yes, the fairest of shakes, and then just literally a sentence later, almost the whole album. Like, that's ridiculous. Like, the guy does not understand that having just, you know, 20 people in a committee for voting on one of the most prestigious music events ever, that's not enough people. Like, that is not enough to be able to definitely secure the idea that, oh no, not a chance. There's not a chance, guys, that there could be any corruption going on. Oh no, don't worry. There's 20 people, meaning that 25% of the entire vote is ruled by 5 individuals. It's not very smart. But yeah, that basically covers it for the important parts of the things that the Grammys chief said about all of this stuff, which, you know, if you're like me, you're probably just sitting there like, what? He thought that was good? Like, he actually thought that was good. That was a good response. This guy's out of his mind. Like, if anything, this almost 100% confirms to me, at least, that something else was going on here, and that they intentionally made sure that The Weeknd did not get this nomination. Especially when you see that not only did The Weeknd just say that the Grammys were corrupt, he also kind of exposed it out there that he was given the choice between performing for the Grammys and performing at the Super Bowl, but for some reason the Grammys didn't really want him to do both. They rather he just do their show if he was interested. So yeah, they for some reason wanted him to perform at their show, but didn't think he was good enough for a nomination. Which, by the way, can we talk about how backwards that whole concept actually is? Like, how can you on one end of it be like, oh yeah, we value excellence, and unfortunately, you just didn't make the cut this year to be that good. But then at the same time, you're reaching out to this guy guy asking if he can perform for your show. Luckily, of course, for the Weeknd, though, like, aside from him not getting a chance at a Grammy, even though this is like the biggest song he's ever put out, he's actually even performed at the Grammys before, so they've acknowledged his ability to be able to create something good enough to perform at their shows in the past. No matter what, we have to keep in mind that this whole thing is just gonna, like, blow up everything that the Weeknd has made. Like, it's gonna go to the moon and back with streams and just sales of everything, because literally everybody is talking about this right now. But of course, it's sad because it doesn't solve the problem that the Grammys have. Like, they still have an obligation to be as unbiased as possible. And to have something so prestigious actually just look really, really scummy at the end of the day, it just doesn't help the image that you guys have been setting for this whole time. But yeah, that's basically gonna do it for today's video. I definitely have a lot more that I could talk about in regards to why the Grammys are worse and how they are so bad, but I just thought I'd give you guys a little bit of a shorter video this week, because obviously I put out like a 25-minute video last week, so wanted to give you guys a little bit of a breather before I try and do anything big again. But if you guys are interested in a possible part 2 to this in the future, let me know, because honestly, there's a lot of stuff that I could still talk about that is very bad for the Grammys. But yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. It's been crazy seeing the support on the channel again. I've been gone, obviously, for like over 4 months, and I just came back, and you guys have been just absolutely, like, destroying, like, just the likes and everything like that, and the subscribers increase. It's just been so cool. Like, you guys have been so supportive. Thank you all so much. And I actually also wanted to, like, I guess it's a semi-announcement. It's not 100% confirmed yet, but I'm toying with the idea of releasing merch before the end of this year, because it's something that I've considered doing for a really long time, and I genuinely have been talking with people who I think could make something really, really cool for you guys. So let me know in the comments, or even just message me if you think you'd be interested in me trying to put out some merch like sweaters and t-shirts and stuff. Also, as always, I have to give a massive thank you to all of my patrons this month. You guys are the best human beings alive. You're so helpful in the amount of support that you guys give me. It is absolutely insane. And of course, then, I've got to give a massive, even more special shout out and thank you to the $10 and up patrons of this month. Those being Farski, Midwestfunky, Helen, Seman Punk, and Medusa Lives. You guys are just crazy. You are the best. Thank you so much for your continued support in such a huge way. Your donations mean the world to me. Thank you. But yeah, as I said before, thank you guys all so much for watching. I really do hope you enjoyed. And as always, it should be art over algorithm. Goodbye.
I just can't think anymore. Bring me back, but I won't. Sit my ass on the floor. I just can't find me no Lord. Don't feel strong where I've been. I'm blowing off in the wind. Paper the rights of my sins. I pray they stop if I